This is Michael Popok, Legal AF After Dark. Well, the trial judge in Colorado may not have gotten the historical context for the 14th Amendment, Section 3 disqualifier clause that normally keeps out insurrectionist and rebellious presidents from ever serving in office again. She may not have gotten it quite right after a week-long trial, but hopefully the Colorado Supreme Court, which is dominated, 6-1 in favor of Democratic governor appointments to that bench, will get it right on the issue of whether our framers back in the 1860s of the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment meant to have it apply to insurrectionist and rebellious presidents as well as members of Congress and senators and others. We think they did, and Ben Meiselas and me, we debate it the only way we know how, on Legal AF, every Wednesday and Saturday on the MeidasTouch network, on a full format curated podcast at the intersection of law, politics, and justice we call, wait for it, Legal AF. You knew that was coming. If you know all about Legal AF, welcome back. Take the clip. If you didn't get a chance to see it on the podcast, take another listen or send it on to friends, family, or others and invite them to join us.
I thought that the judge in Colorado made a ruling of, yes, Donald Trump engaged in insurrection, but no, he's not an officer, even though we've talked about the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and the fact that Donald Trump, you did a great hot take on this, Popok, in prior briefing, claimed he is an officer when he was trying to remove a case to federal court. So Trump's saying that he's an officer, yet the judge in Colorado said not an officer, so therefore former presidents or people seeking the presidency, they can engage in insurrection and try to overthrow the government and they won't be disqualified. But if you're a senator and you're a member of Congress or an elector, then you can be disqualified. It makes absolutely no sense. But the petitioners in that case filed an incredible appeal brief. And look, I don't know what the Colorado Supreme Court's ultimately going to do, but I can tell you that I thought this briefing was one of the most kind of powerful, well-written takes on the 14th Amendment, Section 3. And it was just so very clearly written. Popok, I know you did a hot take on it. You want to tell us what went down in that briefing?
Yeah, I did. I was really impressed by the writing. And you know who was also really impressed by the writing? Somebody who's on the Mount Rushmore of the Federalist Society judges, Judge Ludwig, who came out, and I did a hot take on this, who said it was the most eloquent, efficient piece of writing, right on the money, with the proper analysis of the 14th Amendment, third section, and mapping it onto Donald Trump's conduct he's ever seen. And because he's been very critical that lawyers and judges, including Judge Wallace in Colorado, sort of were struggling with concepts they shouldn't be struggling with. Firstly, that the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which was passed during the Reconstruction period in America as to be a loyalty test to bring people who left the Union, who left positions like senators and congresspeople and went over to the Confederacy, like Jefferson Davis, who became the president of the Confederacy, who had once sworn an oath to support or defend, preserve, protect, whatever you want to call it, to all support the Constitution. If they're going to come back, as I said on a hot take, it's like there was a bouncer now at the door and you weren't getting back into the club unless you either took an oath of office or if you already had done these bad things where you had violated through insurrection or rebellion your oath to defend the Constitution, then you're going to have your disqualification or your disability removed by Congress. This is all self-actuating. And that was driving Ludwig crazy, that and the fact that people were arguing that the rebellion and insurrection had to be against the government of the United States. That's not what it says. It's the Constitution is what you're rebelling or insurrecting about, meaning Donald Trump is not being tagged for being an insurrectionist or rebellious president because of what he did on Jan 6th in the attack on the Capitol. It's that he refused the peaceful transfer of power as provided for in the Constitution through his actions in his pressure campaign against Mike Pence, the use of the fake electors, and all the other things. That is the rub. That is the rebellion or insurrectionist activity. And who knows better than that than Michael Luttig, who's now a historical figure because he was the former judge consulted by Mike Pence about to give him the steel rod up his backside to make sure that he didn't do Trump's bidding and didn't recognize the Trump fake electors instead of the Biden real electors. So he wouldn't be sitting here talking about some sort of Donald Trump with Biden fighting to get back into the seat that he was elected to through a court process. That could have happened, but that's because Michael Luttig also then. And for those that think, oh, he's just like some old-timey guy, most of the justices on the Supreme Court, including one on the and on other courts, including, unfortunately, we're going to talk when we get to the Voting Rights Act in the Eighth Circuit, the judge who wrote the opinion as a former Luttig clerk. Many of them on the Supreme Court are Luttig clerks or trace their heritage or lineage back to him on the Federalist Society. So for him to say that the crew, the group that's brought the appeal to the Colorado Supreme Court on one issue, there's only one issue left for the Colorado Supreme Court, right? And it's 7 members. One does an insurrectionist president, because that's what they now are able to call Donald Trump based on the decision at the trial court level. Does an insurrectionist president get to be on the ballot again because the 14th Amendment, third section doesn't apply to an insurrectionist president? Yes or no? And just to give a little bit of info here, there are 7 members of the Colorado Supreme Court. 6.5 of them were put on there by Democrat governors. The only one that's the half is the Chief Justice, Boatwright, was first nominated for a lower position by a Republican, but when it came time for the Supreme Court, it was a Democrat. So you got 7 Democrats on the Colorado Supreme Court. Based on this briefing and their really proper analysis, I'll just say I'll give one example of where Judge Wallace got so many things right in how she handled it at the trial level, but this one she got wrong. For her to make her decision that the 14th Amendment, third section, did not apply to a president, she said she went back to an earlier draft in the 1860s of the 14th Amendment, third section, and said in the earlier draft, there was a reference to the president by name that it applied. And in the subsequent draft that was passed, the name of the president, the title of president and vice president were removed. And therefore, she then concluded that that's an example that it shouldn't apply to the president. Wrong. The earlier draft had a narrow catch-all provision of all federal officers who also support the Constitution. That version was very narrow because they were listing it like a statute, like they were getting very specific in the draft. The president, the vice president, the electors, the this or that, and it had a very narrow catch-all. When they passed the 14th Amendment, they eliminated the laundry list of positions of federal office by name, but they broadened the catch-all provision to include any federal officer who takes an oath concerning the Constitution. You can call it support, you can call it protect, preserve, or defend, but it's your relationship with the Constitution has to be such that you swore an oath to support it. And so that captured the presidency as a position. How do I know that? Because there is legislative history and debate where one of the senators asked another senator as part of the legislative process, would this allow Jefferson Davis or the president who is an insurrectionist to be, I think there's a mistake here. And the response by another senator was, look at the catch-all language that would apply to an insurrectionist president. And the response to him was, I think I'm mistaken. You're right. Thank you very much for that clarification. Judge Wallace skips all of that. And that's the problem with her legislative analysis, which is hard. I'll give her some credit. It's hard to do legislative analysis, especially when you're going back to the 1800s. But it has to be done, and the brief does it properly for the petitioners. And we'll watch to see the new brief that comes in. The full Supreme Court's going to rule on this at the Colorado level, and if Donald Trump doesn't like it, it'll go over to the U.S. Supreme Court. It may make a pit stop with Gorsuch, who is the judge over Colorado federal things, or it might take a direct route directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. This all has to happen before November, Ben, or way before November, in order for it to impact the ballots. What did you?
I think
what do you think?
I think it'll move fairly quickly after we get a ruling by the Colorado Supreme Court. It's possible Gorsuch stays it and basically says that using the Purcell principle concept that they made up, basically delay things until after an election that they don't want to hear it, or they can hear it on an emergency basis, and they may hear it on an emergency basis. I think they should hear it. I think it needs to be resolved. But we know with the Supreme Court, instead of resolving things, they're seem more into breaking things.
If you have no idea who I am or what I'm talking about, welcome to Legal AF. And that's an example. That's a teaser. And then you can go listen to the long format podcast on Wednesdays and Saturdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the YouTube channel for the MeidasTouch Network or on audio podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcasts from. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, of course, this is Michael Popok, Legal AF.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.